Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking through a few fragrance samples. These are all designer fragrances and I'm just going to say what I think about them and also rank them at the end of the video relative to each other because I think that's sometimes really useful. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire Smith. I make videos all about perfume, perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology even. And I also just do some testing videos and also I do some fun perfume tags. So if that kind of thing interests you and you haven't already subscribed, then please do consider subscribing. And also please like this video if you do like this kind of content. So what's the first sample? So the first fragrance is one from Kayali and it's Eden Sparkling Lychee. So I bought this fragrance sample because I was so curious to try this fragrance because I was hearing really mixed things. So there were people saying that they really didn't like it and then there were people saying that they really loved it. And I just wanted to know which side I came down on. Just to give you a bit of background on this one, I did used to own Eden Juicy Apple 01, which I won in a competition. And I decluttered that fragrance because I'm just not the world's greatest fan of apple in fragrances, and that's taken me a while to realise that, but I think that's really what the problem was with that fragrance overall. But also that fragrance really reminded me of 90s body sprays. I think Mona even said that that was the inspiration behind that fragrance. It was meant to take you back to a 90s locker room, and it really does achieve that, and I don't think I really want to smell like that now, but I can see why that fragrance is attractive. I think it's something that doesn't smell unpleasant. It just wasn't my taste. So I was really curious to try this Eden Sparkling Lychee, which is basically a flanker of Eden Juicy Apple, but also a little bit hesitant because I wondered whether I'd like it or not. So this one, considering the name, I thought it would be mainly lychee, but for me, it's not mainly lychee, it's mainly blackcurrant, especially in the beginning. So I get a really sweet, sparkly, uplifting blackcurrant. It's really bright and really fruity. And the blackcurrant to me is not, it's not tart like blackcurrant can sometimes be. You know, in nature, if you taste a blackcurrant, it's really, really tart. It sort of makes you pucker. And really as well, blackcurrant can smell almost a little bit animalic even, especially the leaves. The leaves can really make you think of cat pee. There's no part of this fragrance that could be described as animalic or as tart or as something that smells like cat pee. It's a very friendly, very bright, uplifting kind of blackcurrant. Really, as this dries down, you start to notice other things about it. So you start to notice the rose. The rose is quite prominent in the background and it's a pink, very kind of deep rose, almost like a rose oil almost. And actually also in this fragrance, as this dries down, you do notice a little bit of the musk as well. As this dries down further, it seems to just disappear. On my skin, it's sort of very faint by about 15 minutes in. It's something I can hardly smell. And really by an hour in, it's almost completely gone. I think this is a fragrance that I would have to be constantly respraying in order to detect. And really the dry down for me was mainly ambroxan, a sweet ambroxan with something that could be violet. I'm not entirely sure. It's so faint, it's really hard to discern. I think really this one just isn't for me. I think this was really a major disappointment for me. I was so curious about this fragrance that I almost just blind bought a bottle in the first place without even trying it. And I was so relieved that when I tried my sample I hadn't done that. This one is just really lacking longevity, and I think even if you like the smell of it, I mean, I like the opening of it, the opening's fine, but it's just the dry down that I'm not so keen on. I think if you like the opening, you'd still probably be a bit disappointed just by how little lasting power this fragrance has. I'm usually a big fan of Kayali. Even if I don't like their fragrances, I think they're well done and usually they last a decent amount of time. But this one I'm not so sure about. So that's Kayali Eden Sparkling Lychee 39. So the next fragrance is one from Marc and this is a flanker fragrance of Perfect and it's the Eau de Toilette version. So this fragrance I was really curious to try because I remember really liking Perfect when it came out about 3.5 years ago. I remember going to try that one in store and being quite surprised that I liked it quite so much. I thought it was a really good fragrance. I really thought that the note structure of that fragrance was really interesting. I liked the fact that it was using narcissus, which is a really underused note in perfumery. And also it has rhubarb, so you had that really interesting play off of something really quite oily with something quite green and quite tart. So how does the Eau de Toilette kind of differ? Well, this one is definitely greener, it's definitely more watery, and it's floral, but in a different and more nondescript way, really. This one is also pretty sweet, actually. I was quite surprised by how sweet this is. As this goes along, it doesn't change that much. It doesn't really evolve too much. It gets a bit muskier in the dry down. There's also a bit of woodiness. And weirdly, there's something a little bit peppery in the dry down as well. I don't know whether there's also a little bit of ambroxan here, perhaps, but there's nothing too bad. It's really nothing that's too noticeable. I think overall, this is what Marc Jacobs trades on. This is a very office-friendly, very clean, almost shampoo-y kind of fragrance. I think really if I were comparing Perfect with Perfect EDT, I'd sort of describe Perfect as something that's off-white, creamy kind of conditioner almost. And I'd describe the Eau de Toilette as something a little bit more soapy. It's something that's a little bit more like a very pale green see-through shampoo, transparent shampoo. This has absolutely no problems with longevity. It lasted about 6 hours on my skin, although it did calm down pretty quickly. It did become a skin scent very quickly. But really, there's nothing wrong with this fragrance. This is exactly what Marc Jacobs does well. And I think this does have a market, but it just doesn't really excite me. There's nothing here that makes me want to reach for it. So not for me, but nothing wrong with this one at all. So that's Perfect EDT by Marc Jacobs. So the next fragrance is one from Dolce & Gabbana, and I remember going to try this in store when it first came out back in September and being really impressed by it. And I hadn't at that point watched any videos about it, and I didn't know anything about this fragrance. I just happened to see it in store one day. And I remember thinking, why aren't people talking about this? And of course, it's just like completely been hyped now, isn't it? Everybody's talking about it. So this one is Dolce & Gabbana's Devotion. So this fragrance, when you first spray it, it's really delicious. It smells like almost like a lemon cupcake with some vanilla frosting on top or something like that. Or even a lemon drizzle cake topped with a bit of lime zest on the top. It's got a little bit of a kick to it. As this dries down a little bit further, it transforms into something with a little bit of spice. It's slightly warm, slightly spiced, and the citrus can sort of smell like something like pineapple, or it's got like a tropical feel to it almost. As this dries down further, it smells more orangey than it does lemony. It's in between the two, and it also becomes more floral, even slightly soapy. In the dry down, there's still that sort of vanilla sweetness that you get in the opening. It still is very gourmand, but the gourmand nature of it is really toned down. And it's something that definitely does veer towards the more floral. But even in the dry down, there's still that vanilla spiciness that I find so delicious in this fragrance, and still that kind of almost tropical feel to it as well. I think this one's just really interesting, and when I compare it to other fragrances that I've smelled, bearing in mind that I've not smelt Bake, which this one is extensively compared to and is by the same perfumer, by Akro, bearing in mind that I haven't smelt that fragrance, I think the closest thing that I've got to this fragrance in the dry down is probably Guimauve by Reminiscence. But those fragrances are very different note profiles, but they have the same kind of sugary sweetness kind of feel to them, and the intense vanilla, almost the powderiness that you get in both fragrances, even though Guimauve is definitely more powdery on the whole. They're really not that similar. They just have vibes of each other. I think Devotion, its main problem is the lasting power. It's something that does go quite quiet quite quickly. And I would say on my skin, it's gone by about 5 hours in, which for the price point is disappointing. But yeah, I really do like Devotion, and I'm really impressed by it, that it's different. That's one of the few designer fragrances that I've smelled in 2023 that I've thought, yeah, I haven't smelt that before. So that's Devotion by Dolce & Gabbana. So the next fragrance is a flanker fragrance of the Gucci Flora line, and this one is the third one released. This is Gorgeous Magnolia. So I tried this fragrance kind of bearing in mind that I didn't really like the first two fragrances in this line, and this was no exception really to this trend. I didn't really enjoy this one either, but I would have to say the first few seconds of this were really promising. So it starts off with this really kind of dry, fruity berry, and that's really nice. But then it's very quickly joined by something that's very shampooey, and it's kind of coconutty. It's not a gourmand coconut. It's not a delicious kind of mouth-watering coconut. It's very much a shampoo, artificial kind of coconut. This fragrance is very musky as well. There's something very grainy about it. It's that laundry musk again that I'm not so keen on in perfumes. It makes me think of detergents. It makes me think of, well, shampoo, as I've said, but also just like washing powders and softeners almost. In the dry down of this fragrance, you do get some florals, but for something called Magnolia, I don't really detect anything that I would say is distinctively Magnolia. There's something smooth, there's something that's white floral here, but there's nothing that I would describe as Magnolia. I have a Magnolia bush growing over my gate, and there's nothing here that makes me think of that. I think really the stronger floral here is the jasmine. The jasmine is quite distinct and it's quite strong at points. And I think if you don't like jasmine, you might not like this fragrance. This is a very strong fragrance and it's also long lasting. It's something that was still really strong after several hours on my skin. And I don't think it's got any issues in that area, but just it's so sweet and so shampooey. It's just not one for me. But if you like that kind of note profile, if you enjoy shampooey scents, this one could be for you because it is so long lasting. So that's Gucci Flora Gorgeous Magnolia. So the next fragrance is one from Jean Paul Gaultier, and I tend to find that I quite enjoy the male marketed fragrances from Jean Paul Gaultier. So I thought I'd pick up a sample of this one. And this is Le Mal Elixir. So I think, you know, for me, Le Mal has that kind of very vintage feel to it because, you know, that was the fragrance that everybody was wearing in the 90s, wasn't it? That was really, really popular. And I really like that they're still making flankers of it. I mean, it's been flankered to death, but I think this one's actually quite nice. So this opens with something very aromatic. And I think really when you think of Le Mal, you think of that sort of combination of the vanilla, the lavender and the mint. And I would say in this fragrance, the mint is very much in the back seat. It's something that if I didn't know it was listed, I don't think I'd smell it. It's very dry and it's very background. So actually this opens with something that I would describe more accurately as something like a clary sage. It's definitely not as sort of floral, soapy as lavender can be. It's not something that I would distinctively think of as lavender. I think it's definitely more aromatic than that. Also, as this dries down, it's quite sweet. So there's honey here and there's also some benzoin, and the benzoin gives it a very sort of caramelized, like liquid brown sugar feel to it almost. But there's also some tobacco and there's a lot of leather here. I wasn't really expecting the leather, but the leather seems to be basically throughout the fragrance. I think the tobacco is kind of being masked a bit because there's quite a bit of isoe super at points in this fragrance, especially in the mid part of the fragrance. And I think if you smell this close up, the isoe super can be a little bit overwhelming, but actually in the air it's absolutely fine. It's not at the level of, say, like a Parfums de Marly kind of level of isoe super or anything like that. It's something that's been done respectfully, but it still is, you know, quite a lot for me. I don't really own any fragrances that have isoe super in any quantity, so this is quite a lot for me. I think this is actually a really nice fragrance and I'd love to smell this on somebody else. I don't think this is necessarily me. I don't think this is something that I'd want to buy, but I think on somebody else or even from a distance, this would smell absolutely amazing. And it is quite strong, it's quite long lasting, and it's not beast mode. It's not something that you're going to knock out a room with, which I think is something that I don't like in fragrance anyway. So I think this is a nice fragrance and I'm pleased I tried it. So that's Le Mal Elixir by Jean Paul Gaultier. So finally, I'm going to rank the fragrances in my order of preference. So number 5, I have to say, is very disappointingly that Kayali, the Eden Sparkling Lychee 39. I just was really disappointed by it. I think that it just didn't live up to my expectations. I'm so glad I didn't buy a bottle of it. And just the lasting power is so disappointing. And also the ambroxan in the dry down really shocked me. And it's just a straight no for me. Number 4, I'm going to put as Gucci Flora Gorgeous Magnolia. It just wasn't for me. It's just not a note profile that I warm to. I don't really like shampooy fragrances. I didn't like the grainy musk in it, and I just thought that the coconut smelled really artificial, and it was just incredibly sweet and so strong as well. That one is just a total no for me. So that's number 4. Number 3 is Marc Jacobs Perfect Eau de Toilette. I just prefer the EDP to this one. I did like that it was kind of fresh smelling, that it had a kind of greenness to it, but there was something weird in the dry down and I just didn't find it very distinctive. It was just very much of a muchness, kind of paled into the background with a lot of other fragrances. but it was, you know, a crowd pleaser. I think a lot of people would like that one. I don't think you could really offend anybody. It's something that would be very office friendly. So that's number 3, Perfect Eau de Toilette. Number 2 is Jean Paul Gaultier's Le Male Elixir. As much as I don't think this one's me, I did like it and I could appreciate smelling it on someone else. I really like the leatheriness. I wasn't expecting that at all. And I liked that kind of aromatic feel in the opening, as well as the sweetness in the dry down. I think it's a nice one. So that's Le Male Elixir by Jean Paul Gaultier. And number 1, of course, has to be Dolce & Gabbana's Devotion. I just really liked it. And I thought it was something I haven't smelt in designer perfumery before. And that is now very rare. So yeah, I would rate Dolce & Gabbana's Devotion. But I do think that it's very sweet. And if you don't like sweet fragrances, you won't like that one. So that's Dolce & Gabbana's Devotion. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed it, then please press the like button and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know, what do you think of these fragrances and how would you rate them? And I will see you in the next one. Bye.